Hello, my name is Alan Jones. Going back here, wanted to create another informative video just for companies and recruiters. This is something that I have noticed in many projects and wanted to talk about how these methodologies, especially Scrum, is really important in software development. So in software development, I think now having worked with these technologies, methodologies, it is a methodology, Scrum. So it's really important that it is implemented, but as have in a way that it gives your project some type of structure. So that's why these frameworks will, like I mentioned more, it's a methodology. So Scrum is a methodology that has been used for that was created basically to have some type of structure. If we actually look at what Scrum is, it is, as the website points out, think of Scrum as a way to get work done as a team in small pieces at a time with continuous experimentation and feedback loops along the way to learn and improve as you go. Scrum helps people and teams deliver value incrementally in a collaborative way. As an agile framework, Scrum provides just enough structure for people and teams to integrate into how they work, while adding the right practices to optimize for their specific needs. You may be thinking, that sounds great, but how do I get started? So then there's different ways of how Scrum is implemented. From there's the planning. So I like this image because it shows what Scrum is. Now there's other methodologies such as Kanban. It is similar to Scrum. I've worked with both Kanban, Scrum, and older like Waterfall. Kanban, similar to Scrum, is an agile framework that visualizes work, limits work in progress, and promotes continuous improvement throughout transparent workflows. This is, in my opinion, like a lighter form of Scrum. And then you have, when you work with the two, you can have what's called a Scrumban. Then when you have a Scrumban, it kind of mixes the two. And in my opinion, having done this for 10 years, working with these two methodologies, it brings both of them in and kind of like the best of both features. Scrum, the idea is, okay, so you start a project, the product goal here, as the image mentions, what is the goal? The idea of this structure, it's really important to know as a software engineer, is it gives you a structure. If you don't have a structure, the idea is you don't just want to throw things on the wall and see if it sticks and then just start pulling from there. And then just start doing things, because software engineering is complex. Software engineering, if you have to think about this, if you're gonna develop a product, why would you not have any order in that product? So this is something that I've looked at in many products that I've worked with in companies, and how they refuse to integrate these methodologies, which they work. That's what they are designed to do. They are designed to help you in your product, to give you some type of structure. Otherwise, you have no rails. You have similar if you're a software engineer, to see what TypeScript is. So today, TypeScript is a technology created by Microsoft to give JavaScript, the front-end JavaScript framework, typesetting features which JavaScript has lacked for many years. So what does this do? It gives you some type of structure and what type of schema or data structure you will be consuming. And it's kind of like a contract when you work with like what's called interfaces. And this is really good for JavaScript because you've never had this before in JavaScript. It's just like there's no rails. Think about a highway that has no rails, and you can fly off the highway. So that's what TypeScript did to JavaScript, similar to what other programming languages have, like C#, Java, PHP. All these programming languages, they have typesetting. So going back to how, comparing that to what Scrum is, because it gives structure. So going back to the software development lifecycle, there is a software development lifecycle, what we show here. The idea is to know the product. So this goes into the product owners, understanding the product. Yes, that is their job, to understand the product. Then when they understand the product, they can deliver that information to the engineers. So ideally what Scrum does there is, okay, this is what we have to do. Let's structure this into what's called a refinement. So a refinement is probably one of the best things in Scrum. So if you look at what refinement is, basically what refinement is everybody gets together. I'm just gonna explain my experience from what refinement is. We can look at the textbook definition of what refinement is. But refinement basically is like, okay, what do we need to know to deliver this product? What do we need? What information do we need for what's called acceptance criteria? And this is something that many teams have no idea what this is. And imagine that they're creating software that's complex, very data driven and all that, but you do not have a clear refinement of what is the acceptance criteria. They don't even know what acceptance criteria is, and how to document this well enough for the engineer to be able to take hold of this single source of truth, then be able to look at that. Okay, I need to do A, B, and C to be able to deliver X. So in a refinement, the team basically gets together. They talk about, okay, so this is what we have to do. Think about a team just sitting on a table and they're looking at, okay, so this is the feature. The product owner is talking about the feature. This is what we have to do. The user expects this happy path here. Just giving you what is the acceptance criteria and the definition of done. So the user has to do this. This functionality has to come here, and then etc. etc. Does everybody understand? And if everybody understands, that is the goal of the refinement. Then the refinement is done. If the team, the developers don't understand, then they ask questions about this back and forth to then be able to get this information and then put it in a backlog, which is the tickets, And then that is the refinement part, which is, like I mentioned, one of the most important things in Scrum, in my opinion, because Scrum, there's pros and cons where you can have like meetings that are maybe too much. That's why you have Scrumban, which Scrumban kind of mixes both of them, in my experience now, doing this 10 years. But that's the idea. So when you have the refinement done, then that basically you have that, okay, print, post, here's your task. Not too much information, not no information, where basically you have a ticket in a software that is complex, which I don't understand why companies do that. And then basically you have the right information for the engineers to be able to look at that, which is the product owner's job, is to get that information in a ticket. So then the engineers can look at that and execute. So that is the idea of a refinement. So then when the refinement is done, then we go into the actual sprint planning. Sprint planning is, okay, we need to do this, this, and this. How long will it take? You can do like story points. There's like the sizing system or Fibonacci. But really it's about like, okay, providing like a realistic estimate for the story, which in Scrum it's called like a story because it starts off with this. They call it a story because it's like the whole process of the development for that task. So just looking at you can go online and you can find different images that have to do with this. But okay, so you have your story, and then once you get that, now this is a simpler way to look at this because a Scrum has more sections here. But the idea is, okay, you have a story. Now this is when the refinement and the sprint planning is done. So then you have the story, then that goes that task goes into the story, the estimates, 8 points. Like I mentioned, there's a t-shirt sizing points, or the point system, which I think it has its pros and cons, but like really it's, okay, this will take 2 days, this will take 4 days, and then you do the equivalent in points, the Fibonacci system. And then that goes into basically the to-do. When you have done the refinement, which is possibly, like I mentioned, the most important part. Why? Because again, very important information to understand about the refinement. The refinement, what it does is it gives everybody the clear acceptance goal of what you have to build. So then you don't go back and forth, which that causes problems, that causes latency, that causes time, and especially it costs money. So I just don't understand why companies, they don't think about these things, and they really disregard this process to have a structure. And one of the arguments that one of the first arguments will probably be like something like, oh, we don't have time to do that. The irony about that is that if you don't put the time into doing this, it'll just eat your time later on with the constant back and forth, which is really and that costs money, and that will take up more of your time. So really, that's why this exists. That's why Scrum pretty much was invented, to get a structure and to avoid that constant back and forth. So then if we go back in, let's go, and now we have that ready to go. So it's in to do, and then goes into process. The development goes into process because, hey, the developers know what we have to do. And then here you can have like a QA section where it goes into QA. And some projects, it's either been like blocked also, because now the block could be because maybe it's a front end task that needs development from the back end, or the back end is blocked by the front end, things like that. That'll be like a different type of board, but usually you have something like this. So QA, ready for deployment, like an extended board, and then basically done. So ideally that will be how Scrum will work in this software development life cycle. So here what it mentions is the backlog. Backlog is everything that you do in a refinement. So going back to the refinement, you talk about all the tasks that you have to do, and then that goes into like a backlog, what's called like just basically a checklist of everything that you have to do, a backlog. In a typical team, you have the developers, the product owners, POs, software managers, developers, typical development environment. Daily scrums is basically what they do is, okay, typical stand-up, you 15 minutes at the max, just to basically talk about what you did. Sometimes this can be just, it's not a boilerplate. It's to just, okay, I'm doing this, and this. And if you need any assistance with that, then you take it offline and you talk with the team members. But basically, this is a good system that is made to give you a structure. Now, there's teams that do it in the wrong way, where they exaggerate this and they actually add more meetings than required. The most important meetings, in my opinion, are the refinements, which basically is the single source of truth of what you have to do. The team understands, and boom, you execute. Then in Scrum, you have what's called the retrospectives. Retrospectives is basically what you did wrong. Wrong, it sounds bad, but or what can be improved. Now, this is something that I've noticed in teams. It has to be done very soft. Otherwise, it can cause like friction between teams. So ideally, you want to approach it, I think, in the 10 years that I've been doing this, is just what can be improved and what you did that was really good. So talk about first the positives, and then go into what can be improved, not the negative. It's really, you have to avoid like pointing fingers and all this. Ideally, you want to have a nice, good environment where everybody can work together and take advantage of this framework, which is good, and it helps you. Gives you a structure. So when teams don't do this, the product suffers, the team suffers. There's a lot of back and forth, misunderstandings, and just basically it costs money, it costs time, and then it's not very good. So I really don't understand why teams do not develop some type of structure. I mean, it could be Scrum, and like I mentioned, Kanban, which is I'm not going to go into too much Kanban, but it's basically like a lighter version of Scrum without like the when I've worked with Kanban, it's like you don't really do like the point system. It's just, okay, I'm doing this, and okay, gives you some structure, like a lighter type of Scrum. But again, not going too much into Kanban, but it is good also. I've seen that when you don't have like the added pressure of, okay, this has to be done in 2 days, and if you don't do it, and that can happen with Scrum, where teams are very, very strict with a 1 week, what's called sprints. So sprints is like you have to get to the sprint, and they call it sprint because you have to get to the goal. But sprinting means running. So Scrum kind of made it look like, okay, you have to run to the goal, but when rushing, then you can kind of take out quality. So there has to be a good balance between speed and quality. But basically, that's why it is called sprints. So your sprint goal, usually a healthy sprint would be about 2 weeks, not 1 week. But some companies choose to do that. But yeah, basically that is what a sprint is. And in Kanban, it's from what I've worked in previous roles, Kanban is not really sprints are not really integrated into Kanban. And then when you go through that whole process, then the definition of done. Now the definition of done should be what the refinement explains in detail. So when you go into, again, just because refinements are very, very important. In the refinement, when a ticket is done, when a ticket is created, when a task is created, usually by the product owner or the product manager, because they are the ones in charge of the project, the ones in charge of doing this system, the ones that should know the product at least, and be able to transfer this information into a task, into a structured, ordered task, where the definition of done should be documented on that ticket. So basically the developer goes in there, okay, I need to do this, like I mentioned, this, and this. What is the definition of done? What is the acceptance criteria? Acceptance criteria is what is needed to be able to, for the client, or what is accepted by the client. So this should work, this functionality, this here. Acceptance criteria, very important. So yeah, in a nutshell, I would say that's kind of what my definition is of Scrum, having worked with this Agile methodology. And then when you have like Scrumban is like a mix of both, where you don't really do a lot of the meetings, but you use like, okay, we can use like retrospectives, we can use refinements, but not too much like in projects that I've worked in is like not too much the sprints. So yeah, I will leave these links in the description to check out. But yeah, I highly do recommend companies to really, if especially if you're a startup. So if you're a startup and even starting a product, I think it's really important to have a structure. And I still don't understand why companies they don't do this, and the excuse of just we don't have the time to do that because documentation takes time. Well, hey, guess what? If you do not do this, the time it'll take to go back and forth and fix on what the team didn't understand and what the product owner thought they understood, and then because developers are supposed to be psychics and understand things and just that doesn't work. So yeah, please have some type of structure, whether it's Scrum, whether it's Kanban, Scrumban, but ideally you want to have some type of structure. If you are a fan of, if we go back into the programming logic of what is clean code and all that, hey, I mean, I'm pretty sure every company that has some type of software and they have code, they value clean code. I'm like, no, let's just throw all the code in there. And so I don't understand, if you want your code to be clean, why wouldn't you want your process to be clean? So yeah, thank you very much for viewing this little video about what is really Agile methodologies and how I think they work and give software projects and development a structure that is needed. And without this, so it's versus just throwing things on the board and seeing what sticks, kind of like throwing toilet paper on the ceiling. So thank you very much. If you like that, just give me a thumbs up. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye.